Okay, class, this is taking what's listed in the syllabus as two lectures, one on kind of theories, mass communication, the other on ethics, etc., and condensing them into two, or rather into one lecture. And this lecture I'm not going to repeat and just go over a lot of the stuff you already have in your book. It's all very good that's in your book, and as it has been all term long, so go ahead and read it. This lecture is intended to just underline a few points, amplify a few points, and maybe add one or 2 points as I look over all the content we've covered this year. Okay. First, sharing some media news. I couldn't help but actually be pleased when I saw this headline in the New York Times that in this new very big spending proposal that has passed Congress but has yet to go to the Senate, there is a small amount, relatively speaking. 1.7 billion is actually a fairly large amount, but relatively speaking to other things in the bill, there's some money for local media to get tax credits. We've talked a lot about local media this term, and we've talked about newspapers in particular and the importance of local reporting to make sure that that important matters are exposed to the light of day. And I'm just going to mention, I don't have all the specifics right to mind, but in the recent case of Ahmaud Arbery, where, as you may know, the 3 defendants were found guilty, each guilty of murder, the local law enforcement bodies in the town, the city, the area of the crime were not doing very much to bring this case to justice. And the family, I think particularly the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, was very vocal about that in the press, as was a local reporter there in that area who was also took the local law enforcement to task for not following up on this. And I have heard it be said that without that local reporter banging away, this case may never have been brought. And this again underlines the importance of local news capabilities, which is why this piece that I just cited is good news. Well, this is the very long description of your term project. I'm going to just say right off the bat, I lifted this whole thing from Professor John Simone, who is kind of the lead guru at FIT for this course. I've cited him. I hope he forgives me. It was just so good and well thought out that I thought it would just be the best way to go. So this paper is due on our last class, which I believe is Friday, December 17th, but you owe me a write-up on what topic you'd like to write about. It needs to be on a media/communications, mass communications topic. There's some suggestions up in the first paragraph, but you're supposed to submit to me by 12/3, which is the end of this week, topic, and it needs to be a little write-up. Okay, if you have any questions about this term paper, please email me and let me know. Now to our lecture. Fighting a bit of a cold. I've got a theme. You guys know I like themes. The theme actually is media literacy. It's all about the source. But for some reason, just saying that a lot made me think it's all about the sauce. Maybe that's a Massachusetts accent. I don't know. That's what a lot of today's talk is going to be about. So the wrapping up lecture is almost everything we're going to look at involves understanding, researching, detective work, thinking about who is behind, who is responsible for the content that you see, and the importance of knowing who that person is, knowing the person's background, before you decide whether or not to consume that content when it's on your plate. Okay, so just to remind everybody, if you have concerns, as seemingly this child does, put it in the 3 things you learned, one thing muddy, that we do every week, and I will do my best to address. Wrapping up as we get to the end of the class. There will be one more lecture after this one, which will cover the topics of global media, and there will also be some thoughts about job opportunities in the media world. So that will be the next lecture, which will be posted by December 10th. So we've got 4 topics to talk about in our wrapping up. First is which came first, which does come directly from one of your chapters in the book. Second is freedom of the press versus disinformation, which is another topic in those chapters. The third is basically taking a lot of that thinking in point 2 and applying it to refining the template, the SMAMBER template, kind of a silly acronym, making it more pointed, more focused, and changing it. So we're going to show you that. And then another topic, stereotypes and cliches. Maybe should have been lifted and gone before media literacy, I don't know. But anyway, there it is. So you remember we said right from the get-go, the real goal of this class is to make everyone in it more media literate, more thoughtful about what you see, what you hear, what content is put before you. And this is one of the key questions that's posed in one of the ending chapters of the book. Do mass media affect our society? Or is it the other way around? And I suspect the answer is both. It's neither one nor the other, but it's both. For instance, you can see what this obviously very young person seems to be about to do. Was that in any way influenced by all of these people and countless others smoking in films and TV shows? Or is the fact that they're smoking in the film or TV show just because it's done in society? Again, the answer is probably both. A lot of people look to movies to the actors they think are cool or they admire, and they want to be like them. And again, what about violence? Is seeing violence and the use of guns in films lead to more guns in the hands of people out there? Now that's a pretty irresponsible thing to do, what this young man is doing. I think we read a lot about that, heard a lot about that with this matter that seems to have died away out of the news now. But you remember Alec Baldwin in this film called Rust, where a young woman was killed because Alec Baldwin pointed a gun at her and pulled the trigger and the gun was loaded. And he pointed it at a camera, and she was behind the camera. And so what is this young fool doing, I wonder? And if you tell me, based on your knowledge of guns, it's not a real gun, I don't care. It's not appropriate. So all the violence in films and games, for that matter, lots of violent games. I'm not a big gamer. I'm not a gamer at all, as a matter of fact. I'm nothing against it. But there's a lot of shooting in those things. And does it make us callous in regards to taking guns around and aiming them and using them? I don't know. Ask Kyle Rittenhouse what sort of movies he watches or games he plays. I wonder. And then another type of bad behavior that I showed you when we discussed films, and I showed it early, to talk about what I see as the outsized influence films have on people's behavior. Particularly if you're a relatively young person, an adolescent, for instance, and you see a character you admire, actor you admire, behaving in a certain way, smoking, using a gun, or abusing women. Maybe somehow these things become more acceptable to you. Right. So, it's a quote from the author of our textbook, as we're talking about films are a part of culture, movies, mass media are a big part of culture. Culture is an historically transmitted pattern of meanings embodied in symbolic forms by means of which people communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and attitudes toward life. Right. So the media and the people are all part of this big thing called culture, right? Communication. We showed this early in the first class, I believe. This is why we're kind of wrapping up, right? Going back to some themes and things we've talked about and starting to maybe pull things together, fill in some gaps. Communication evolved from Latin, what the Romans spoke. And I think it's related to the English word community. Members have something common to each other. Communities are supposed to be formed with the tie of communication. It's the foundation of the community. Hence, where there's no communication, it can't be a community. Here's some definitions of community again. And here what I'm saying is this communication is between and among individuals, and the media, in a way, are just part of that. The individual writing or producing the content in the medium is part of the community. And so is communicating to the community when he or she shows something good or something not so good in what he or she creates. There's our happy community. Living together, or at least having common interests. They are a community. There's another take on it, again by Stanley Barron, the author of our textbook. Mass communication is the process of creating shared meaning between the mass media and their audiences. Communication goes two ways, though, right, everybody? Yes, it's the source sending the message through a medium to a receiver, producing an effect. But also, this is a more sophisticated model, which shows mass communication, which shows more than one receiver. It shows communities of receivers. Each one of these little dots, the red, the green, the yellow, the blue, has other little dots coming off it because they're all different groups of people. But down at the bottom you see delayed inferential feedback, and then you see input from news sources, art sources, etc. So the line doesn't just go from source to receiver. It goes back the other way, like a feedback loop. Action, effect, feedback. Action, effect, more feedback. More action, another effect, more feedback. And in fact, I believe this is what we see again. The media influence society Society influences the